Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Faith with Reasons, show number 423. Can't believe they haven't kicked us off the air by now. But
and counting.
it's there, but for the grace of God, right? And as we come on the air, of course, you just heard more of our prayers mentioning the intentions of the dearly departed in people's families and friends and so forth. And it's been a real challenge because we got such a great response to that mailer for people to send in names that we can pray for. And so that's why you're hearing them so frequently. We're trying to get all those names on the air. And then, of course, the bigger part of it is the prayers being offered even as I speak at Our Lady of Consolation Shrine and Basilica, the conventual Franciscans there that have agreed to pray for all these. We've sent them all the names and everything. So just a wonderful opportunity as we are on this solemnity today of All Souls Day.
Yes. And I think that's what we're discussing today.
Yeah, looking forward to reacquainting ourselves with Monsignor Charles Singler, who is in studio with us. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here again.
And, of course, we used to go to you all the time for liturgical reasons because you really kind of headed up Divine
Office
the
of
Office
Worship.
of Divine Worship. And we very often broadcast some of the special liturgies at Our Lady Queen of the Most Holy Rosary Cathedral, and you provided commentary for this.
Color commentating, yeah.
That was wonderful to get behind these, and especially if you're listening on the radio. It's always difficult to listen to Mass on the radio, but you really kind of painted the picture for us.
Sure. Yeah, I enjoyed that. That was a great time in my priestly career in the diocese.
And what a career it's been so far.
That it has.
Who knows what's ahead for you now. I'm not going to do the whole biography.
Yeah, it's too big, yeah.
But you are currently the pastor at St. Rose of Lima Parish in Perrysburg.
That is correct, yep.
And you've worked in parishes, diocesan offices, various diocesan committees over the years, ministering in the Office of Worship as its coordinator, and then assigned as pastor to Bellevue Immaculate Conception. From there, he became associate pastor and then administrator pro tem at Perrysburg St. Rose. That's the last time, not this
time.
Right. Yeah. And from 1999 to 2003, Monsignor was director of field education and the pastoral internship program at Mount St. Mary's Seminary. You've served as Toledo Rosary Cathedral rector for 7 years and as director of Office of Divine Worship and of the Office of Vocations. And Monsignor has served on Art and Architecture, Liturgical Commission, Diocesan Synod Convocation, and Liturgy Committees, Renew 2000 Core Committee, Priest Personnel Board, Priest Continuing Education Board, and the Diocesan Priests Council. And despite all of that busyness, in 1998 and 1999, you were named Chaplain of the Year by the Knights of Columbus.
Yes.
So
the Perrysburg group.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
Yes.
And now
I'm back in their midst
again.
I'm
back home again. Yeah.
That's right. I'm like an old shoe, an old boot. You just can't get rid of me. I'm just kind of come back in different forms. So.
But always very comfortable.
Yeah, very much so.
You're broken in.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, glad to have you here, especially on a solemnity like this.
I need to correct you. It is not a solemnity today.
It isn't?
No. Yesterday was the solemnity of All Saints. Today is referred to as the commemoration of all the faithful departed. And traditionally, we've always known it as All Souls Day. But it's not a solemnity because it's not. We had masses celebrated in our parishes, of course, on this day, but it doesn't rank in the pecking order of feasts and seasons as would be a solemnity, which was yesterday's solemnity of All Saints. Today is the official title is a commemoration of all souls.
So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Set things straight. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, is it? Yesterday obviously was a holy day of obligation.
Yes.
Today is not.
Right.
Does that vary from place to place? I mean, is that
there are certain solemnities that are designated as a holy day of obligation. In the United States, there are 6 days obligation that we have in the Roman calendar here in the United States, and that's up to the local conference of bishops to determine exactly what those days are. In our United States, All Saints would be a day of obligation. The Immaculate Conception, coming up on December the 8th, is a holy day of obligation. Christmas, of course, Mary, Mother of God, Ascension Day, and then the Assumption of the Blessed Mother in August would be the 6 feast days that are ranked as days of obligation here in the United States. A couple years ago, the bishops of our country on the East Coast and the West Coast and the Midwest kind of altered the significance or the day of obligation, the obligatory aspect of Ascension Thursday. They moved it to Ascension Sunday, which is the 7th Sunday of Easter in the Midwest. If you go to any of the dioceses on the East Coast, they still celebrate Ascension Thursday, the 40th day after Easter. So primarily because of the sensitivities to people being able to go to church on those days and as a work day, and finding it difficult to do that. So they thought that by putting Ascension on a Sunday, it's a normal day that we all go to church anyways. So that's why it was. I think it's probably more of an experimentation that's been going on, but they haven't changed it yet. We've been doing it for some time now, but
and I can see that. I mean, there's certainly great worth in maintaining the specific days rather than transferring them.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you're in danger of sin if you miss Mass on a holy day of obligation. And as you say, if people work and they don't get there, and they don't get out in time, or there's
their
some
schedule in work does not permit that to happen. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that makes sense. But on a day, say for example, on a Thursday that's transferred to a Sunday, on that Thursday, you're not doing a Mass for that intention, right?
Not on that. The feast would not be celebrated on that day.
So the whole feast is
moved to the
It's not
Sunday.
like 2 chances.
No, right.
Got it.
2 for 1.
Double dipping.
There you go. I love that. All right, see, I've learned a whole bunch of stuff already. Pretty good. Now, Shane, you are a convert to the faith.
Yes.
All Souls Day, All Saints Day, Halloween. What were your impressions?
Well, growing up as a Protestant, that's very, very early in my faith life. I practiced really nothing after I was confirmed. It was basically Halloween. I didn't know anything about All Souls or All Saints. It was just Halloween. It was just trick or treating, which is rather unfortunate.
We definitely have some rich traditions in our church, and of course, Halloween. I don't know what came first, Monsignor. Was it Halloween or All Hallows Eve?
All Hallows Eve. It would have been certainly a commemoration for the saints. And interestingly enough, in our Christian tradition, feast days for saints can go way back. I mean, we're talking about the 3rd or 4th centuries when there's beginning to be a codification, if you will, of feast days. There was a document, that ancient document in Latin from Rome, called the chronograph of 354 A.D., which was a kind of marking different kind of pagan feasts that were celebrated on the calendar, but also indicated along with that the dates of martyrs' deaths, Christian martyrs, and popes and bishops who were leaders of their communities at that time. Their particular death day, which in our Catholic and Christian tradition, the death day is the day of their birth into eternity. So we call it their natale, their birth into eternity, when a person has died. And that custom even today is considered when there's setting a date for the celebration of a particular saint's feast day on the liturgical calendar. Oftentimes they'll look at the day of their death as the day in which that would be celebrated, their feast would be celebrated. But there are exceptions to that. I'll use the most recent example would be St. Pope John Paul II's feast day is October 22nd, which is actually the day when he was installed as the Supreme Pontiff of the Holy Roman Catholic Church in 1978. And his date of his passing was in April. So it was chosen that his election as Pope would be the day on the Roman calendar when he is recalled with great affection and memory on October the 22nd. So going on in the course of human history, the feast days of saints were something that evolved. So we were already in motion, already putting these kinds of things in place of memorials and feast days when one died and celebrated their life as a holy person, as a designated person of holiness in the church. And it was kind of around the time of Pope Gregory, I believe it is, Gregory IV, who codified the Feast of All Saints on November the 1st. Originally, the martyrs were remembered together as a kind of a common feast on May the 13th. And that's when all saints and all the martyrs were remembered. And then he came along and codified it to the point where they moved it to the November the 1st date that we use today to celebrate the Feast of All Saints. And then as time progressed, then in around the 10th century is when we begin to see this observance of All Souls Day, kind of originating as would be the case in the Middle Ages, and as time progressed, in monastic communities developed a kind of an observance of remembering people of all souls and all saints. And I was in the 10th century that in a monastery in Cluny was established an observance on the 2nd of November for All Souls, and that progressed into what we have today.
So how did Halloween get attached?
I think it was an observance actually to celebrate the saints of all the saints, and then we demonized.
Yeah,
we took the secular entered into the picture, and then it became, the fearful approach to the observance of All Hallows Eve, and that's where we get the word Halloween from. All Hallows Eve as a way of commemorating and remembering all the saints. And then as time progressed, we began to put the scary part to it.
Because obviously these feast days are days of celebration.
Yes.
So people are supposed to be having big meals, partying, whatever the case may be.
Yes.
So now there are. And I just read recently, and I was looking for it. I haven't been able to find it yet, but I heard something recently about 2 or 3 aspects that were actually Catholic traditions that are supposedly the reason why we have the practices we have today in Halloween, like the dressing up and the actual the trick or treating and things like that. There were, and it had to do with in England, and I don't know if you can speak about.
Well,
that.
just in commemoration of the saints, it's a joyful celebration, and so the eating of candy and making of cakes and cookies and those kinds of things, that would have been certainly part of it. There also was a custom, even in the early times, when our ancestors in Christianity died, the surviving members of families would go to the graves of those beloved members, to the catacombs, basically, in early Rome during the time of the persecutions and following. But they would have celebrations there. They would take their whole meal and celebrate. It was kind of like the precursor to the wake service dinner that you'd have when a loved one died, as an observance of celebrating their lives.
Sure.
So the celebratory nature of how our ancestors did that in the early Christian communities was a way of an ongoing remembrance, if you will, of their life and their death in this world. The other thing which I recall significantly when I was in Rome a number of years ago visiting the catacombs and celebrating Holy Mass there, we were at the catacombs of the Domitilla in Rome, and they're deeply placed down underground, the catacombs, and they had a custom of family members of bringing an oil lamp at the actual site where their loved one would be. And so they would light that, and that's where we get the notion of the prayer, let perpetual light shine upon them, may they rest in peace, and may their soul and all the souls of the faithfully departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen. And in our own time today, a lot of folks will have those solar lights with like in the image of an angel or a votive light at the grave site of their loved one as a way of the ongoing prayer, if you will, the ongoing remembrance of those who have gone before us in faith.
So I think Halloween is probably a case where we actually have a Catholic holiday, if you would, that is actually co-opted by secular society because, like you said, we've demonized it.
Some Catholic parishes will encourage the children, rather than dressing up in goblins and ghosts and that kind of thing, is that they dress up like saints.
Yeah.
And they'll have the procession of different saints. They'll either their patron saint or a particular saint that they love, the individual child, as a way of acknowledging, again, our celebrating the life of the saints. And thus then the giving of the candy and those kinds of things makes it even more celebratory for them in doing that kind of thing.
Very good.
Monsignor, of course, you've got a very vibrant school there at St. Rose. Did the administration at the school, the teachers, did they have special?
We had what was called trunk and treat. Now I have a confession to make. The pastor of St. Rose did dress up like a pirate because our mascot are the pirates.
Oh, that's right.
So we did our little trunk and treat along with lots of other families. I mean, I think there were over 200 children on our campus in the parking lot of our school and parish who were coming by and whatever. And of course, they didn't know who I was because I was using my pirate voice with them.
I was going to say, you would have to talk like a pirate.
Right, and I was pretty well hidden behind that costume. I mean, I had the long hair and a beard. I kind of went as kind of like Blackbeard, the pirate. But it was a joyous occasion. It was an occasion that people just were in a celebratory way, and it was not on Halloween. It was several days before all of that. So, but I know of other parishes where they will dress up like saints, and they have a parade of the saints. You know,
so you didn't make anybody walk the plank, did you?
Did not. No. Nope.
That's good.
There were actually a couple other pirates there. My associate was one of them too, Father Kyle Gase, who was the first mate.
We're going to have to check out St. Rose Facebook page.
I think it's on there. You might find it. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's children love to dress up anyway, and especially when they get enamored by certain saints. It's really not difficult. It's not a tough sell. It's not like you're trying to talk your child into, let's not be a zombie. Let's be, a hero of the faith.
Right. And they are. The saints are heroes and heroines of the faith over the ages, and their life, their challenges. I was reading, and it was part of my homily for the Feast of All Saints. I believe it was Pope Francis made reference. The saints are who they are, not so much just because they were good. It was because they opened their hearts to the glory of God, which shone forth from their own lives and their witness. And he uses the example of speaking of the saints like a stained glass window. There's multiple colors in that, and the light shining forth from the outside into the church through the stained glass window is actually how the lives of the saints are to us. They emulate a certain color, the curtain coloring, a certain transparency, because they opened their hearts to the love of God and followed his way, even at times when it was very difficult. I cited the example certainly of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who was a doubter as well. I mean, there was a darkness in her life for a period of time. And I had the privilege of meeting her in Rome on the same day with St. John Paul II. Mm-hmm. Now, this has been some years ago. They weren't saints at that time. We were not designated saints of the church. Mm-hmm. But to watch the interaction of that moment was just a really a touching and inspiring thing, at least to my priestly life, to have had the opportunity. And then, of course, when they were declared saints officially by the church, I'm thinking, my gosh, man, maybe I shouldn't wash my hand here. I mean, I literally shook hands with these two individuals.
Wow.
A very touching moment to have had the opportunity to do that. So,
wow. So as far as the getting back to the roots of these solemnities, this was around the 11th century.
Yeah, actually, it was around the 9th century.
9th century, okay.
Yeah, 837, Pope Gregory IV ordered this general observance of All Saints' Day as a feast day in the Roman calendar. So he was the one that transferred it, if you will, from May 13th, which kind of emerged out of the Eastern Christian community, and put it in the Roman Western ritual on November the 1st.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. So the Orthodox, do they celebrate these days as well, or do they?
I think they do. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I was in my little research here online. I was really surprised to read that there are other Christian communities that do observe, All Souls Day as a way of visiting a cemetery or praying at the gravesite of a loved one. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are part of the requirements that if you will, that are part of our devotional life, the piety that's around this particular feast, and doing good works. And we often refer to them as indulgences for the sake of those who have gone before us. We believe that All Souls, today our prayers are for the people who are in purgatory, who haven't gotten there totally yet, are not there yet, whereas we believe all saints are in heaven with the Lord. So this particular feast allows us to connect with all people who have died and to pray for whatever is lacking at the moment of their death, that they still had venial sins on their soul, that by our good works, our prayers for them, lighting of a candle, offering a prayer, doing good works, visiting a cemetery, praying for them. This is all part of our devotional life to allow reparation to occur and allow them to entrance into the kingdom of heaven.
So I'd like to take you back to the Protestant churches that you found that observed this. My guess would be perhaps Lutherans and Anglicans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Probably two of the oldest denominations.
Right.
I could see
and who are closest to us.
Yeah, the carryover.
If you will. Right.
Yeah, the carryover that tradition.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It is a beautiful tradition, and to remember our own departed loved ones and to have a specific time of the year. I mean, obviously we should pray for them, the repose of their souls each and every day, but at least we have a day that we can really dedicate our prayer for and think of people who have gone before us in our lives, not only among family, but maybe coworkers. And through the years, I was just kind of coming up with a list in chapel just the other day, and it's like, I forgot there were that many.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. A lot are forgotten.
Well, and particularly in the United States, this time of year for us, we also have the surrounding environment changing around us. So it even adds more, I think, to the depth of what it is we're doing of those who have passed.
That's a great point.
Because the trees are changing color and the falling off the trees, and it's getting colder and the darkness seems to be taking over. And let's face it, those are the kinds of emotions that we feel when someone we love passes. Is a kind of a painful sorrow that we feel in our hearts. So I think the choice of November 1st and November 2nd for these two observances, I think, is most appropriate for us in our times.
You just gave me a brilliant idea, Monsignor. with the leaves falling and everything like that, we're raking leaves, we're blowing them to the curb. Each one of those leaves could represent a soul that you're praying for in purgatory.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
well, that's.
I'm going to blow leaves this weekend, and I'll tell you what, I got a lot of them.
Very good. So one thing that came to mind prior to the show, I'm just looking at perhaps different cultures celebrating this in different ways. And of course, I stumble across the Mexicans. I think they call this the Day of the Dead.
Yes,
and that's celebrated over the first and the second. So, do you know of any other cultures that may be similar to Mexico that celebrate this time differently?
certainly if it's a Christianized community in a culture, a country, they all probably have their own particular observance. Certainly the celebration of Mass is probably the high point of what would be done culturally in those Christianized communities.
Yeah, sure.
And prayerful remembrance. And I know there's some parishes and cultures that will have the visitation to a cemetery as part of this day to offer prayers at the gravesite of a loved one. And maybe even tying that along with some kind of a celebratory meal as a way of acknowledging the life and celebrating the life of the individual who's gone before them.
Now, I'm not certain, but I think Halloween's probably just something that's in the United States. I don't know if it's necessarily celebrated anywhere else. I mean, I could be wrong. Do either of you know?
I don't know.
So maybe it's Halloween and here in the U.S. and maybe it's Day of the Dead in Mexico. And I'm just talking about these celebrations that take place outside of the church's observance. Because obviously Mexico is a very Catholic country.
Oh, yes.
So I mean it's so that would be understood there. But I'm just trying to think of other areas that may celebrate it.
I don't know what the Aussies do or what the French people do. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, Christianity has spread through so much of the world. It's in every corner of the world. So I would imagine there's at least some official observances similar to ours elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Have to maybe send out some pen pal requests.
A custom on this particular day, on the Feast of All Souls, the commemoration of all the faithful departed, priests, and still to this day, it was kind of set in place in 1915 by Pope Benedict the 15th, the observance and offering of 3 masses for the deceased. As a way of acknowledging the importance of eternity and the importance of their lives, the souls of those who have gone before us. So priests are permitted to celebrate 3 masses on this particular day. The normal protocol is that we're permitted to celebrate 2 masses on a given day, but what is referred to as trination on this particular feast was established, and it's never been changed since as a way of acknowledging the deceased.
That's interesting.
And that was early 20th century, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Good stuff. And, of course, the communion of saints, this reminds us that we're all connected. The church militant, the church triumphant, the church suffering. So we'll pick up on that as we come back from break, shall we?
Good.
You're listening to Faith with Reasons. Monsignor Charles Singler in studio with us. And we will be right back.
I'm Peter Range, Executive Director of Ohio Right to Life, and I'm a strong supporter of the Culture Project International. Friends, the foundation for the pro-life movement is the family. To rebuild the family, then, it's important we begin having those tough conversations with our kids about the purpose and meaning of sex, the value of the human person, and the dangers of social media. The Culture Project is an initiative of young people to address these fundamental issues. Please schedule them today at thecultureproject.org and support their mission to rebuild the family and rebuild our culture.
As we mark the solemnities of All Saints and All Souls, we at Annunciation Radio, along with the conventual Franciscan family at Our Lady of Consolation Shrine and Basilica, pray for your departed relatives and friends. We pray for all those who you have submitted to us, including
Ray G. Dotson, Reverend Thomas Wanger, Donald E. Whitt Sr., David Goldsworthy, Pat Whitt,
Rita Fuller, Mary Catherine Thies, Mary Stanley, Dan Russ, Doug Josephine, Stan, and Margaret Valentine.
Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them.
May these souls and the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace.
Amen.
Come see what's new at the St. Vincent de Paul Toledo Thrift Store on West Sylvania between Secor and Douglas.
During the week, we have 25% off and 50% off on items, as well as Saturdays are 75% off color days. We help you save money while trying to get some retail therapy. Keep money in your pockets and trends in your closets.
The St. Vincent de Paul Toledo Thrift Store, West Sylvania Avenue between Secor and Douglas. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6, Saturday, 10 to 5.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Yeah, welcome back here. Shane Stanfield with Ron Finn. Today we have in studio Monsignor Charles Singler, pastor of St. Rose in Perrysburg. You've been around for a while, worked in many parishes, diocesan offices, and various committees. You ministered at the Office of Worship as a coordinator until 1992, and then you were assigned as a pastor at Bellevue Immaculate Conception. From there, you became associate pastor and administrator pro tem at Perrysburg St. Rose, and that was your first stint there. From 1999 till 2003, you were director of field education and pastoral internship program at Mount St. Mary's Seminary. You were Toledo Rosary Cathedral rector for 7 years, served as director of Office of Divine Worship and Office of Vocations. Served on the Art and Architecture, Liturgical Commission, Diocesan Synod Convocation and Liturgy Committees, renewed 2000 Core Committee, Priest Personal Board, and it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, you don't have to go through that litany.
But we should note once again, in 1998, 1999, you were Chaplain of the Year, according to the Knights of Columbus.
Yes.
So.
I had the privilege of serving as not only as their local chaplain, but also served on the what they refer to as District 2 of the Knights of Columbus, and I was the faithful chaplain for that, faithful friar, I think is what they refer to it. And it was really enjoyable. I think that the Knights of Columbus really do fabulous work in our local communities and in our diocese particularly, but even worldwide. I mean, they offered the funding to have the facade of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome refinished back a number of years ago, and it's a great fraternal organization, and they're good men.
And they also they were the ones that produced the Mother Teresa documentary movie that's now back in theaters. I think tomorrow, I think is the last day for it.
Okay,
but so many things that the Knights do. We've got our Annunciation Radio Fall Share-a-thon coming up, which I'm very pleased that you'll be a part of that.
Yes, I'm excited about being here for that, yes.
But the first day of the Share-a-thon is the Knights of Columbus Day, so the whole day of Tuesday, the 15th of November, it'll be Grand Nights, it'll be representatives from various councils, it'll be the state assemblies, and it'll be all dedicated to the Knights of Columbus to honor them. But they're also going to come in and answer the phones, or the whole day will be theirs. In fact, I don't think we're allowed in the building that day.
may not have room. So
looking forward to that. Now, Monsignor, before we went to break, of course, talking about saints, as we pray for our departed loved ones, and we pray for their eventual sainthood. But the communion of saints that we enjoy, that I think is such a great gift from our Holy Church, really connects us to those that have gone before us.
Yes. If you think about even our daily and weekly celebration of Holy Mass, that it really is what connects us more intently with the communion of saints. I mean, we mention them in the Eucharistic prayers. I mean, Eucharistic Prayer 1, which I did yesterday for the Feast of All Saints, has some specific names of saints, and while it always ends up, as you do that litany of saints in that Eucharistic prayer, it says, and all the saints. So nobody slips through the cracks on this one. It's a way for us to realize that our earthly liturgy is united with a heavenly liturgy, If you've ever been, I'll just use an example, because I'm former rector of our cathedral church in Toledo, Rosary Cathedral, the beautiful apse design of the coronation of the Blessed Mother, the fifth glorious mystery of the Rosary, kind of culminates that beautiful coronation of Mary as Queen of Heaven and Earth, but around her are all these saints painted on the apse of the church. That this whole thought of the communion of saints and always looking forward to eternity is what really is at the foundation of the faith that we celebrate. We're always looking forward towards that. We're looking, and we ask through the intercession of the saints to help us to attain what they themselves are experiencing, that we too might be able to share in that, by our witness of faith, their courage, their sacrifices that they made, the struggles that they had, and the victory that is theirs, having achieved heaven to be with the Lord, is something that we all pray and we all hope for in our life. All the more reason why we need a solemn feast of all saints. And the feast and the commemoration of all departed souls gives us the opportunity to pray for those that are not there yet, that they will also share in that. Because we are the church on earth who is praying for them.
We discussed the last half of the show the practice of folks actually going to cemeteries to maybe have a meal or what have you, to be and I think this is more symbolic, to be closer to your departed. And I see the correlation with this communion of saints, because we wish to do something that symbolizes this closeness. Obviously we're as you mentioned before, this is part of the liturgy at Mass, and we're taught to believe in this communion. But I think this is it's a beautiful symbol to actually go and be closer to. It's much like what you mentioned in the last half, going to the catacombs. They're filled with bones. So the practice was to clean the remains, and somebody could actually go and they could touch their dearly departed.
Right.
They could be with them.
Right. I think that's the importance, I think, of All Souls, is it allows us the opportunity by our visit to a place where someone who's gone before us. That's why I've had conversations with people like, well, I'm going to be cremated and I'm going to have my ashes strewn over Lake Erie or put in a garden or whatever. And my comment always back to them is, well, where will your family members be able to go to remember you? I mean, where is there having your cremains or your bodily remains buried somewhere in a Catholic cemetery allows that a location. It's holy ground. It's blessed ground. We don't re-bless the graves of people that are in Catholic cemeteries. That ground has already been blessed at the outset of when that cemetery was established. So that again, that connection. I was thinking also during the break of a saying that a former professor of mine said many years ago in the seminary. He was an English professor, a very eloquent preacher, who said that the church in heaven is made up of all saints, and the church in purgatory is made up of all sorts, and the church on earth is made up of all sorts. We are a mixed bag, but we hope. And our hope is, through our prayers and our good works and our lives here on earth, that we too can attain eternity, that we can attain heaven as of the saints in heaven.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. For those that don't know, the church in heaven is referred to church triumphant. Purgatory is church suffering,
yes,
and we're referred to as church militant.
A church militant,
militant. So,
because we're carrying the banner.
So, I guess this is a nice segue into those that have been are what we're commemorating today. The souls of the departed. They're not yet saints. So
there was something lacking.
Yeah.
At the moment of their death, that they either a sin that wasn't confessed or a particular thing that they didn't have resolved in this life, and so purgatory in our church's teaching allows us, those of us who survive them, to spur them on to bring reparation for them by our good works, by our charitable acts, by visiting the sick or doing good deeds for people, offering prayers for them, lighting a candle. All of those aspects contribute to that effort to allow them to finally see the beatific vision.
And of course, we don't know that may have already happened.
Yes,
but we're asked.
Don't you want to be sure?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and of course, God works out of time, obviously.
Yes.
So what we do today could
Yes.
have been something that easily took place
Yes.
years ago.
Yes.
But this is something we're going to participate in, and so that gets to the next question. The value. What is the value of the prayer for the dead? The significance of this, like you mentioned, these are things that we can do here as a means to help our loved ones
Right.
Move on to eternal rest.
Right, and the tradition of in our belief of trying to purify souls to enter eternity, to enter the fullness of life in heaven, is a practice that goes back to the Old Testament times. If you go to the second book of Maccabees,
yes.
that whole notion of praying for souls on departing from their bodies and not being perfectly cleansed from venial sins or not fully atoned for past transgressions and have not yet seen the joy of eternity in heaven, the faithful on earth, through our acts of prayers, giving of alms, deeds, and especially by the sacrifice of the Holy Mass. This is the origin of having Mass intentions. It's not because the church needs the money.
Yeah.
That's an honorarium that helps, will go to the coffers of the parish. But to remember the deceased at Mass,
like alms giving.
having an offering of Mass for a deceased person, that's the ongoing way of how the Church unites itself from the earthly liturgy to the heavenly liturgy, and asking the Lord to bring those loved ones who have died to the fullness of life in heaven.
This kind of gets into the area of indulgences. And I think this is where the Catholic Church may have gotten itself in trouble. It caused the split.
Buying your way back into heaven.
Yes,
is how it was looked at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But that's where we were actually giving alms. And I'm sure there was probably legitimate corruption that took place at the time, but that pretty much speaks for what you just mentioned as far as the giving the money intentions. So you can use an.
By the way, no one can be denied an Mass intention even if they don't have the money for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just something that you do in honor.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's more of a gift, a personal gift
to the church.
To the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't go to the priest, I can tell you that.
But it's on behalf of that loved one.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And that's even a greater sacrifice. I mean, I can see the value in that you're giving up something more to the benefit. Now, you're not if you do an indulgence, and this is something that you do obviously for yourself. You can actually do it for the dead as well, correct?
Yes. Yes. Another thing which I think our listeners might appreciate knowing too, if you've ever been to a Catholic funeral Mass, the orations, the prayers that are offered in a funeral Mass all speak about asking God to forgive the wrongdoing of the deceased.
Wow.
So we are already beginning that, or even when a priest is called to administer last rites, as we have known them over the years, those bidding prayers as someone is dying, we are also at that moment in time asking God's forgiveness for any sin that they may have committed in this world. In fact, the priests are entrusted a prayer called the apostolic pardon that can be given to an individual who's close to death, of pardoning them of all of their earthly sins on this side of eternity. So the Church is always mindful of this in its prayers, especially within the context of the funeral Mass itself. We are constantly asking for the forgiveness of the sins of the deceased, that they may share in the fullness of life. And those prayers the options that we have now with the retranslated Roman Missal that came out in 2010 are just very poetic. They're really wonderful orations that we have that speak about this whole thought of forgiveness and God's mercy and God's compassion. That in itself can be consoling to people when someone they loved in this life is taken from them. And maybe they were the type of person who really didn't live maybe a completely virtuous life and everybody knew about it, or they cussed a lot, or whatever it might have been. These prayers give us a sense of consolation in that moment of one's passing.
And they certainly provide joy and comfort for the dying. I know I was very fortunate to kind of get a witness to that. A friend was dying. Didn't know he was that close to death, but because we were texting back and forth. He's in the hospital, and he's on his deathbed. And his pastor came and ministered to him and gave him last rites, heard his confession, and he texted me back, and this was, I think, the day before he passed away. He texted me back in a really long text, just expressing all this joy and peace that he felt, and how he was really looking forward to the next life.
Wow.
It was such a contrast.
He was very fortunate to have had that grace.
And I was fortunate to be able to witness that.
Right. When my own father passed back in 2012, was diagnosed with cancer and had home hospice care at my parents' condominium in Sandusky. The care that he received, but he had enough time to prepare. He was still alert up until several days before his passing, and we conversed, and he was ready and had the opportunity to say to everyone. It was kind of like I told my family after his passing. I said, not many people get this special grace as a family to say goodbye like we did. So always treasure that opportunity to have that.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
Now, Monsignor, obviously we're praying for the souls in purgatory. We're praying that they kind of speed their entrance into heaven, and so forth. How about them? Are they? I know we can ask for the saints for intercessions, but the souls in purgatory, do they have the capability?
That's a really good question. I haven't died and come back to know. That's a very good question, and I wouldn't know. I don't know how I would reply to that, except to say I'm sure that any person who goes before us is aware of us in some way, shape, or form. I'm not certain. I don't know. I don't know how. You baffled me on that one.
Well, and you hear some people say that, I prayed to my mom and she answered my prayer. I mean, people kind of interpret what they want to interpret, I suppose. But I guess my thought, and I don't know if I was taught this or something, was that they really couldn't pray for us, so we need to double our prayers for them. This is the time to pray for them, not to ask them to pray for us. Right.
And those that are in heaven are the ones who advocate for us before the throne of God, because they see the beatific vision. They share in that. They feel it. They know it. It's an interesting life of ours in the Catholic Church.
So the folks that are in purgatory, it may not only be an unforgiveness of sins, but it could also be reparation to a certain extent, and perhaps that reparation would be to pray for loved ones. I mean, I don't think the Church has ever taught this. I mean, they haven't ruled on this either way, have they?
Not that I'm aware of. No. I think more that those who advocate for our cause would be the saints in heaven. I think those that are in purgatory, those that have not shared that in the fullness of that at that point in time, are not there at that point to be able to do that.
So I'm praying to get my loved ones that are in purgatory into heaven so that they can pray for me. Yeah.
So what about those that have visited us, supposedly from? I mean, I was just reading this. Of course, we're just coming out of Halloween, so we have these instances where the dead have visited loved ones and warned them of the fires of hell or whatever the case may be. And I understand there's actually a museum at the Vatican in regard to this, apparitions that.
I believe any of those kinds of things do in fact happen.
Well documented. So,
yes, I believe that those kinds of things happen. It may be their particular way of allowing us to steer our course in a little different direction. Maybe
Sure.
we need to have someone advocating for us. But to be able to, from their own experiences of life, perhaps. But I believe that those kinds of things do happen. I've been in instances with people that I've seen that have where a miracle has occurred due to an accident, a car accident, and you're praying the prayers of the dying at the bedside of someone who's got every IV hooked up to their arms, and they got their arms outstretched like they are on the cross with Jesus in that moment, with a apparatus that's breathing, literally breathing for them, and you're talking to the doctor who's standing there and says, I don't think this is going to last long. You better get ready for a funeral. This is what the doctor's saying to the family. Of course, the family is praying intently, and so this was an incident that occurred back in my previous parish out in Putnam County, and the young gentleman was thrown from his car. It was coming in from Bowling Green State University and hit an 18-wheeler head-on and was thrown from the vehicle and was life-flighted to St. Vincent Mercy Medical Center, and I immediately came there to be with the family. And so I thought, well, I was already beginning in my mind to get a funeral homily in my what would I say for this 20-year-old gentleman with regard to his passing. What would I say? And the day passed, didn't hear anything. 2 days passed, didn't hear anything. A week passed. He's moved to a different level of intensive care. A month goes by. He's moved to a different hospital. A month and a half goes by, or 2 months go by. And he's in Columbus at the Wexford. Is it Wex? I can't remember the name of the at Ohio State. Anyways,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
For ongoing care.
Step down.
So I go to see him in Columbus, and this guy is sitting up in his bed. The guy who I thought was going to die, and he has a complete recovery. Gave the toast at his brother's wedding as his best man.
Wow.
And had to learn how to walk, how to talk, everything all over again. It was just. So I always refer to him as my miracle man. I've witnessed it. I've seen it. And I do know that God had there were angels around that young man, and people advocating for him, whether they were in heaven or in purgatory. I think that there was some sense of connection with him.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. That was a very touching experience of my priesthood. So I'm a believer, definitely.
And I like the term you just used, advocating, because when we're praying for others, we're advocating for them. And when we pray to the saints, they're advocating for us. Our guardian angel advocates for us to a certain degree. So it's a wonderful relationship that we have, even though they're not physically present to us. We have this deep connection that transcends time and space.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of great stories out there, and it's these are all just basically reminders to us that we are connected. This is getting back into the communion of saints. This is very real. Obviously, you experienced it with this young man in the hospital, but I'm sure. Everybody has had some sort of near death or maybe a death experience where they've come back or they've witnessed somebody in the process of dying. I have relatives that people were surrounding them as they were passing, and my grandmother in particular, she was comatose, and she sat up, and she hadn't moved in weeks. And she sat up and opened up her eyes and reached her hands out and were waving as if come here, and she passed like that.
Wow!
Right at the last minute.
Yeah.
My father, who was suffering from cancer, woke my mom up and was talking to somebody, and she didn't know who. But she was talking and she couldn't figure out what he was saying. She goes around the other side of the bed and he just said, "I'm dead." and he was gone. So he was having a conversation with somebody.
Wow.
So these are things that
I believe these things happen.
Yeah,
I would not sell them short that they happen. I do think that they, and that may be. And what's your explanation for it? It's called the grace of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes there's a grace that God gives that you've never imagined that you would ever receive in your life. And those are moments when God's grace abounds in a way that you can't explain it.
Yeah.
When pieces of the puzzle start coming together, my dear mom also died 4 years ago, and I was not able to be with her. I was actually celebrating Mass at the moment of her death in the parish where I was serving in New Cleveland at Holy Family Parish. And Father Monty Hoyles, my dear friend and former housemate, was able to get to the hospital after celebrating his Sunday. She died on a Sunday, and of all days, it was the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. So my mother always prayed the Rosary.
Oh, wow.
And she got the apostolic pardon from my former housemate. So all those kinds of variables just don't happen. Bishop Thomas is known to tell us this: there's no such thing as coincidence. Everything is providence.
Amen. Yeah.
And I believe that providential things happen in people's lives for a purpose and a reason, if anything, to strengthen our faith and to keep us hopeful and always have our gaze on the life awaiting us in eternity.
Yeah.
And we're just about out of time, but whenever we're at the funeral home, for example, there's always holy cards.
Yes.
Usually there are holy cards. Now, I always take one because it's a great reminder of who I want to pray for. You end up with a big collection of holy cards, but, and they vary in the different styles and how much art is on them and so forth. But any physical reminder, I think, helps us.
Absolutely.
Well, Monsignor, great to have you back here again.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to invite you again. So
okay.
You have to think up your excuses now. And we look forward to seeing you on, the Friday of Share-a-thon.
Yes, I'll be here.
Great. Terrific. And hopefully you will be tuned in for that as well. Next week, we've got the Miracle Hunter on next week.
Yep, sounds
Michael O'Neill.
like a good show.
They just started the new season of the TV travelogue on EWTN, the Travel Adventure Explore with the Miracle Hunter, and Marian apparition sites will be explored in HD and everything. So that's going to be fun to talk about that. So thanks for joining us on Faith with Reasons today. For Shane Stanfield, I'm Ron Finn. Enjoy yourself, and thanks for listening. Pray for the dead.